I want to start you off with a Trump Truth Social tweet. He said, "A massive armada is heading to Iran. It is moving quickly with great power, enthusiasm, and purpose. It is a larger fleet headed by the great aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln then sent to Venezuela. Like with Venezuela, it is ready, willing, and able to rapidly fulfill its mission with speed and violence if necessary. Hopefully, Iran will quickly come to the table and negotiate a fair and equitable deal. No nuclear weapons, one that is good for all parties. Time is running out. It is truly of the essence. As I told Iran once before, make a deal. They didn't, and there was Operation Midnight Hammer, a major destruction of Iran. The next attack will be far worse. Don't make that happen again. Thank you for your attention to this matter. President Donald J. Trump."
Right.
So how do we get out of this one, Dad?
I don't know. I mean, it's just an example of the completely sort of chaotic personality of Donald J. Trump. Unfortunately, he's also the commander-in-chief, so this can have real consequences. I don't see any messaging discipline here, right? In the past, it was all about the nuclear program, and, there was a steady drumbeat. The Israelis had been working on it for decades, right? And the Americans joined in, and so at least we knew what it was supposed to be about, right? I think it was primarily regime change, but the message was we have to put a stop to, their nuclear weapons program, which didn't exist. They're going to have the bomb in 2 months. That's what it was all about. And now he's talking about the nuclear program again, the one that he supposedly obliterated less than a year ago. And he doesn't even mention the protests, that would have been the justification a couple of weeks ago. I think that was the hope that that insurrection really was going to be successful, that certain institutions would be captured by the insurrectionists and then, which would facilitate some kind of decapitation or regime change attack. But that's all, so that failed. Here we are. Now we're talking about the nuclear program again. I don't know that it's convincing anybody, but he doesn't seem to care. It's just like, I got these big toys and I'm going to, Venezuela was a lot of fun. Let's have some fun in Iran.
Yeah, well, he's talking about they need to make a deal, but there hasn't been anything.
Yeah,
you know what a deal is even supposed to be about? Like you said, they didn't mention, is it ballistic missiles? I mean, the nuclear regime change. So that's not even an option. Right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, before we knew, before there were negotiations about the nuclear enrichment program, right? Those were ongoing, and then it turned out that those were a cloak for the attack in June, the launch of the 12-day war. But we haven't been talking about negotiations. So that's just another example of just kind of the completely out of the blue, completely kind of arbitrary nature of this message. We're not even sure why usually we know the excuse, why we're attacking Iraq. There's actually a great deal is invested in preparing the public for it and trying to convince them that this is necessary. And then we do it. And then it turns out that the whole thing was phony. There were never weapons of mass destruction, whatever. But there's just there's been very little effort, or it's just very, very chaotic. It's not even clear yet exactly, what deal? What deal are you talking about?
Right. I think maybe the way Trump's mind works is he thinks he's going to intimidate these other countries, send their armada, put a lot of pressure on them, and then we'll see what he can squeeze out of the country.
Yeah.
He doesn't even have an idea. He's like, well, let's just threaten them, scare them, bully them, and see what they say. And then we'll start talking to them, and then we'll be like, all right, yeah, we're friends. Now you listen to me now. That's the way he's thinking. But we know that Iran's not going to do that, right? Iran's not going to make a deal. They're not going to kowtow to anything that the U.S. is demanding.
Yeah.
So,
right. I suppose you can say it's not clear exactly where we are vis-a-vis Greenland right now. Again, there was these threats. We got to have Greenland. We got to have Greenland. And then Mark Rutte, apparently negotiated some sort of deal with the U.S. to say, okay, we can give bits of Greenland to the U.S. We'll give the Greenland, the Denmark, that is, will cede some territory for American bases. And also they will have mineral rights and oil rights and this kind of thing. We'll just give that to America. And then it seems like for the time being, but now it's not clear what's going on because the Danes have said, hey, we didn't agree to any of that.
Right.
Trump's not talking about it anymore. But I think he quite possibly, remember he was talking about it a lot at the end of last year, the beginning of last year rather, and the end of the previous year. And then he didn't say anything. And then he brought it up again. It became an obsession. So I think it's quite possible a year from now that he'll start talking about Greenland again. But you could say that that's a case where, you just put this tremendous pressure and then something drops from the tree, and he just takes it. And I think that may be right. I don't think he has a plan, but he just, he's like a mafioso. You just bully him, and then the guy who runs the store or whatever gets scared and offers him, something. You get a share of my profits, or here's my most expensive, jewelry. You can give that to your wife or something, and then he's happy and goes away, and then comes back later. Maybe that's about it. The thing is, I find the Iran case, I think, is very dangerous, much more so than Greenland. There was never going to be a real war over Greenland and Venezuela. Venezuela, unless we actually try to go in on the ground, Venezuela really can't defend itself from the air in a significant way. But Iran can. On the other hand, like Russia and China, these are too powerful. And I think the U.S. is really kind of understands that we can, we can push, but we can't push too far. We really don't want a war with them. But Iran's in the middle, because it's not a superpower. It's not a great power. But it's not a weakling either. And that it's in that kind of gray area in the middle where miscalculations can be made. Where some people, maybe including Trump, believe firmly that the Iranians are ready to collapse. They're a house of cards. We just need to give them a push, or do a massive attack, and then it'll just be all over. And there are probably people who really believe that, and that Trump may be among them. But as we know, Iran really can strike back and do some real damage, and we could have a really serious war on our hands. So this is a very dangerous situation. It's a place where I think there's a high risk of a serious miscalculation that could lead to a major war.
Do you see any potential off-ramps?
I don't know. It's just like, again, we don't know sometimes these special operations people and, the intelligence agencies, they can be pretty creative sometimes. They can, who knows, but they may do something symbolic and that Trump can claim as a victory and just leave it there. I think that's his preference. He wants to, but it's not clear that he can actually do that. He can make it clean. It can do something without getting a major retaliation from Iran. And then, we're in real trouble. There's a possibility of decapitation strikes. That's something that's obviously being considered, including up to and including the supreme leader, Khamenei. And there's another possibility is maybe, an oil embargo, just shut down the Iranian ports. Apparently in the past, way back in 1979, when the embassy hostages were taken, there was some sort of, at least there was one, I think an admiral that proposed seizing, their major export port, not really going in on the ground, but just seizing that one port. That's a possibility. Now, the problem is you do that, that would be a crippling blow to the Iranian economy. But 90% of Iran's oil exports go to China, and I don't know the volume, but I'm sure that it's actually quite a bit more than what China was getting from Venezuela. And they've already lost Venezuela. This is something that China, would. I doubt that they would take that. Lying down, there would be consequences. I don't know that it would be military. It may just be economic, but they could. But again, China has shown that it can inflict serious economic damage on the U.S. So I don't know. It could be anything from that, from seizing a port to some sort of, a decapitation strike to, maybe something just more symbolic. That if Trump realizes the other things are too dangerous or, have a low chance of success, it shows that he is reluctant, right, to get involved in a real war. I think that's clear from his behavior all along. But the thing is, again, he can miscalculate and think that he can do something, quick, in and out, and then find out, oh, wait a second, they retaliated. One of our ships sunk. Now I can't steam away and proclaim victory. Now we got to strike again, and then we have a full scale war on our hands.
Right, and you say try to do something symbolic, but I mean, I don't think there's anything symbolic that you can do that won't initiate a retaliation from the Iranians.
Well, that's probably right. Yeah.
I think the Iranians have made it pretty unequivocally clear that, we're not holding back this time. You strike us, and that if they feel like an attack is imminent, they will be preemptive. And this is the other danger, that Trump is, maybe he's trying to adopt the same strategy in success he had in Venezuela. The Armada showed up off the coast of Venezuela and everybody was wound up tight, and then it just sat there for months, blew up a couple fishing boats and, they say narco-terrorists, who knows who they killed. And then it just kind of sat there, I think, with psychological pressure on the whole nation of Venezuela. Like, oh my God, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Then all of a sudden they had this kidnapping. And now the problem is, if they do this here with Iran, they stand out there and they try to do the same type of thing, sort of test the waters, maybe blow up a fishing vessel or something. Anything that they do, I think will immediately, though, start a retaliation. They can't, if they do anything, or even if they're just staying out there too long with that psychological pressure, Iran might just start to think, well, they're here this long, preemptive strike is necessary because it's clear that they're going to do some type of operation. That's why they're here. We saw them do it in Venezuela. Mm-hmm. They have openly admitted that they want to get rid of the regime change. They have prominent politicians in the United States calling for the death of their supreme leader, and it's just saying, "Get Khamenei now, get him." Like, it's fever pitch. They're just shouting it, like, we got to do it now.
Yeah. I think certainly they would be justified. Preemptive strikes, it's often certain attacks are described as preemptive strikes, but they aren't justified. I think that's true. For example, the 1967 war, it was claimed to be a preemptive strike. They were getting ready to strike us. I think later investigations showed that wasn't true. The Israelis used that excuse of a preemptive strike to launch an attack on the Arab armies. But in this case, it would, first of all, they have been attacked, in a very treacherous surprise attack last June. The Iranians have been, and they've been under attack in so many other ways too: assassinations and the insurrection and, economic warfare. And then, just outright threats to kill their leader. And if there's a country that would be justified in launching a preemptive strike, is there a situation that might call for it? I think that this is one. Now, I don't know that they're going to do that. There are risks. It's a difficult thing. Again, I think they probably, at least, I would think that they would try to avoid a war as much as possible. Again, as a war, no matter what, is going to be very damaging. They are building up their air defenses. They are strengthening their military in general, building up their missile arsenal. And the Israelis recognize that. I was just reading in the Israeli media that they kind of understand, the Israelis do, the IDF does, that it's running out of time. And that's one of the reasons, this could really hurt. They can hit us back, but, in a year's time, there's nothing we can do. There's still a chance that we could succeed at this point. So anyway, I think that just looking at it, dispassionately, the Iranians might say, we'll do whatever we can to avoid a real war right now, because we know that time is on our side. We need to be ready. And then there's a small window of opportunity for them now, but that will shut. And then the enemy will not be able to attack us.
Do you think that we need to be worried about false flags, that if Iran doesn't do a preemptive strike, that there could be a false flag attack on one of our bases, on one of our ships?
Sure. Again, Israel has a history of doing that. The most famous is the Lavon affair.
Or USS
And again,
Liberty?
we're not 100% sure the motivation there, why the Israelis were attacking the USS Liberty. But I think that's the most likely explanation. Yeah, I think it probably was a false flag. It was an intended false flag.
For war with Egypt, right? I mean,
Yeah, right. I think that probably is what it was. So, and then you can just say like this recent insurrection, that was kind of a false flag too. There was you get your own agents in there to create mayhem and then start pumping the media full of these inflated figures. Yeah. So it makes it look like the Iranians are just massacring their own people, but in fact, it's really the ones that are causing the mayhem. By and large, are your own agents. So it's a kind of false flag right there. So yeah, it's certainly possible. It's certainly possible.
do you think that let's say the insurrection, do you think you said that's kind of a false flag? Do you think it was successful? Because it seems like a lot of the people have woken up to what's going on.
Yeah.
They don't believe
Well,
it. I mean, maybe some do, but
no,
I see
actually,
on Facebook.
Yeah. I think it was partially successful. This is one thing you find actually through much of the leftist media. The established media is just going to repeat what the Israelis are saying and what all these, phony Iranian organizations are saying, all these inflated figures, just repeating them as gospel truth. You knew that was going to happen. And certainly it did. You would hope that within the leftist media, like especially those people that have been good on Palestine and what's happening in Gaza, that they would be kind of awake and aware of what's going on in Iran. But a lot of them weren't. Quite a few of them were not. So I think that it actually has succeeded with a good part of the population. I think that there has been these terrible massacres, tens of thousands. The number keeps on getting bigger every day, again, on the basis of nothing. So there are people who really do believe it. But it just seems like the administration themselves, they don't talk about it anymore. It's just like, okay, that didn't work. And now we're going to say something else.